Hey guys, welcome to another patch notes breakdown. This time I'm joined by Chronicler, he's that way, and Peter up there. Guys, say hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. How are you all doing?
Apparently, we're in the land of doors in need of oiling, and maybe this is a game in need of patching. I don't know. There we go. Transitioned.
I like it. That's a good segue.
Yeah, well,
We're gonna have to get used to it, aren't we?
I could use it as well. I'm just going to give it to you every single time.
I feel we should use that as punctuation. Like, what do you think?
okay, well, jumping straight into the actual first change. Of course, guys, it's patch 9.7, which is the one that we've gotten to. But Kale is the first one up. Guys, what do you think about these changes? I've seen it really tear up competitive play both in LCK and in LEC. So I guess she kind of needs some nerfs.
After you,
Yeah.
Chronicler.
Thank you, Peter. I feel
You're
like,
welcome.
The thing with Kill is that her power curves, to me, feels like really jarring. And I don't even know if she's... I think she's probably OP.
Okay.
But just in terms of how inevitable she becomes at a point in time, and like I think the problem is that initially she seemed really bad because her early laning phase is pretty terrible. But as people have been learning to play around that, like new builds have been popping up, like Blade of the Rune King, Collapso Kill builds. So like they're kind of getting around that bad early game. I would just in general like to see her smoothed out a little bit more because I feel like her power spikes are so jarring to play against that either you're gonna have to neuter her, which with this patch, like they're starting like they're gonna go that way. Although these are like some fairly light taps on the shoulder, right? Like they're not, it's not too bad. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like changes are alright. I feel like Kale is just designed, which is kind of annoying to play against, and I think that's why they want to not make her like a priority pick like she is right now.
Yeah, well, what do you think, Peter?
Well, it's worth noting that the Radiant Blast and Celestial Blessings, their kind of mana decrease sort of offsets each other to an extent. Though I imagine you're using a lot more of the Radiant Blasts than you are of Celestial Blessings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of on the same page Chronicler here a bit in terms of, I think she was, like a lot of champions are, an experiment for Riot to see how far they could push the idea of really terrible early, ridiculous late. I think maybe if they just pull back a little bit on that idea and had her be a little stronger early and a little less ridiculous late, that she'd be a bit easier to balance.
Well, to be fair, she's also like as far as I've seen from LCK and LEC that once you have like an early game jungler, she's actually fairly good when it comes to ganking. One change, even though it is a light change, that I'm happy to see is Celestial Blessing overall. Just see that movement speed being taken away a bit, because movement speed for her is pretty crucial, and now with her having less of that, just makes her a bit harder to use in a gank early on.
Yeah, well, I guess you were touching on that she gets the Celestial Blessing onto her jungler as well as herself.
Yeah, that too, but also herself when you want to escape from a gank.
Yeah, I looked at some stats for 9.6, and going from the top lane, like she occupied top spots on win rates in the top lane from I think like 25 minutes onwards or something.
Yeah, but I think that these nerves are mostly aimed at her, her solo queue performance, because I feel like in competitive, Kill is basically, I think one of the easiest top laners that's like in the meta right now to gank. Like she's super susceptible to gank. She doesn't necessarily push a lot, although she will once she gets her, exalted at level 6.
Yeah.
Once you get like the flaming strike.
Well,
but before that, she's really easy to gank, right?
Well, Scar was talking through this on his patch notes, saying that I think he thought the reason why she was kind of problematic in solo queue is because teams weren't coordinated enough to actually do that with any regularity. So the same sort of thing as with Cassidy as well.
Yeah, so there's no punishment, right? Because it's solo queue, so they want to neuter her so she doesn't automatically become insane, which makes a lot of sense to me. But that's why I kind of feel like her state in solo queue is more problematic, as you say, Peter, than her state in competitive. Although that she's quite strong as well. It's also because a lot of the popular top laners just keep getting nerf hammered.
Oh, something else with the Starfire Spellblade. Going from Freak's discussion on this patch, even though they've taken off a couple of percent of missing health and given it an AP scaling, it's not really worthwhile to hard stack AP just to get back to those numbers, because you need, I think you need like about 200, somewhere between 200 and 400 AP over the course of the game to get back to the same number you had before. So I think it might not be worthwhile. Like, it's a very small AP scaling.
Yeah, well, you're going to hit like 200 always, probably, right? Just on the basis of your runes are like Gunblade, Triforce. It depends on what you build, right? Kill feels like all Bruiser's a vault, where you can just build anything and it just kind of works.
Yeah. Well, bear in mind it's a big enough the further you go along as well with the E. So it's missing 4% at level 5, which is why if you've got that 200 ability power, it's still not going to make up for the difference.
Yeah, well, a good discussion, guys, on Kill. Let's move on to Urgot. So he's been hit a bit more. Now both passive damage decreased late, E cooldown increased early, cost increased, and our damage has been decreased. He did get a few buffs in the last patch, and he simply just rose a bit more in popularity. We've seen him being played more in the jungle as well, simply because he's a fairly good ganking jungler.
Yeah, if I may, Peter.
Yeah. Let's just do it this way. If you go first, then what I can do is I'll pick up all the threads you lay down, and then I'll come to the big conclusion. I'll be like, that's really smart.
Nice. That's what I like. I love how with Urgot, right, basically said in one patch, you know, this character, he's had like 100% pick and ban in competitive foot lane for a very long time. That's nerf him. And then the subsequent patch that immediately go, wait, you know what would be cool if we make Purge permanent? Which I think is one of the main reasons why he's currently played in jungle as well, because his jungle clear is just absurd.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really funny how they nerfed him into basically still somewhat viable state, but not really. And then the subsequent buff, they immediately buff him. I think he's still going to be fine now. I think he's going to be less priority picked, but I still feel like if these nerfs hit the way that Riot intends them to, and I think his trading power gets a little bit neutered. The nerf on his E is actually quite big, because you're generally going to go for W or Q, maybe. So you're going to be stuck on that initial E for a long time. Although I'm not sure to what extent 2 more seconds is going to be relevant for you. Like you can have some situations where it's like just enough, but generally you're only going to get that off like once a trade or once a skirmish, right? Like realistically. So I don't know how much it actually really matters. I think it's more about the passive and the fear beyond death, which is some nice light touches that might make him a little bit less of a walking crab god that he is right now.
Well, to touch on the passive a little bit, it's worth noting that the passive changes don't actually even come into effect until level 11. Like, they're exactly the same up until that point.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. Like, I mean, you talk about the jungle clear and stuff. Like, presumably that's not going to affect that in a serious fashion. I get it, because I assume that as it goes on, the Echoing Flames is going to have less of a immediate impact, at least in terms of just this max health damage. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a major thing.
Well, talking again about the jungler Urgot, really the thing being majorly hit here is his ganking with that disdain. You have a lower cooldown on that now, and it costs more mana, so when you then go in for a gank, going back to the jungle could be harder, because you don't have as much mana, and you have to use 10 more mana on that disdain. And for prolonged fights, if you go for a prolonged gank, or it turns into a skirmish, then suddenly you're not going to have that up as often anymore.
Black Cleaver still seems to be quite core on Urgot, even though they've kind of incentivized him to build more AD with the rework that Chronicler was talking about. Well, I say the rework, like I don't know. I guess it's
Purge changes. It's a mini rework. Well, like they swap the shield, they make Purge toggleable. It's quite a big change.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess there could be situations where that comes up, but I kind of feel like there's a lot of in this patch, there's a lot of degree buffs and nerfs, which I kind of feel like in this case, Urgot is like a degree worse, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to make him not really, really good.
Yeah. Well, then moving on to some of the simple changes, where there's actually a lot of interesting changes. First up, we do have a Seer, getting a bit of health growth increase in terms of the regen, and also his Q damage has been increased.
I'm gonna assume you want me to take first, Peter.
Oh yeah. Just assume that going forward is fine.
Yeah. I feel like Seer is already like in a sport way niche viable. That's kind of what Riot is trying to do, right? Like, and this might be what tilts him over the edge. I think it's mostly about the health regen growth as opposed to conquering sands. I don't think like 10 damage is going to make that much of a difference. Although I'm not that well versed as to how Seer operates, so maybe I'm underestimating it, the relevance of that buff there.
I think overall, and we're gonna see this later on in the simple changes, guys, Riot, they're looking a lot on mid laners that can shove fairly easily in this patch. So we're gonna look at Morgana and Lissandra as well. And while Q...
Silas.
Yeah, Silas as well. And while the Q changes isn't big, it's like giving a bit more damage to a Seer so he can push more efficiently. It's not a big change, but it's definitely something.
Yeah, from what they gave him like a dagger's worth of attack speed in the last patch, from what I remember, just in his stats. So, Chronicler, you mentioned that we'll get into this a bit later on, I suppose, but the potentially tanks could start being a bit more viable this patch. From what I hear, Azir's a pretty decent answer to 2 tanks.
Yeah, and I kind of like Azir as well, as long as he doesn't become like... He has a nice power curve, right? Like, it's not like, as we talked about previously with Kill. He can still get punished. I wouldn't mind Azir being a little bit more viable, because I feel like currently he's just a little bit too weak. And as I said before, I'm not the most knowledgeable on Azir, so I'm not sure whether that is because Azir's early game is too lackluster, or whether his late game is just not enough. I'm inclined, based on the buffs, to say that Riot thinks the second, so maybe that's the case. And then either way, like, Azir is fine. Like, he can use some buffs. These are small buffs. They're probably not going to make him bonkers. It's probably good.
Yeah, they definitely have to be careful around Azir, because I agree with what you said early on, that he is a niche pick and he fits fairly well in, but there just are picks that are better in the current meta.
I think you also have to be very good with him to get the best out of him.
Yeah, okay, but we're talking about pro play mostly, right? So that doesn't really, that doesn't really matter, because everyone's gonna at least somewhat play things to their I want to say like maximum efficiency.
I would say in response to that while that's true, I'm not sure if people would put the time into Azir to learn him properly at that kind of level. They need to be able to play him at.
I feel like there's a lot of, like, especially if you're a controlling mid laner, like, if you've played for a while, chances are you've been playing Azir, because there was a time where it was pretty much pick and ban, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, but then also a guy who has seen play in the mid lane, well, at least back in the days, it's Shogath. Now primarily up in the top lane. Guys, he's getting a decrease to his cooldown on the Q. It's not a big change, it's 2 seconds, but it's going to give him a bit more help in terms of his crowd control and zoning, especially if he gets a good early game jungler in that can gank for him. Yeah,
this also ties into the rune change that we're going to see later, but I feel like I just kind of thrown tanks a bone, which I like. I feel like tanks can afford to be a little bit more relevant, especially at the highest level, where it's mostly stuff like, mages, Vladimir, Karma, Akali, bruisers like Jace, Aurelia, Jax, Yorick is a good... I mean, Yorick isn't really kind of fits the bill, but he's like a split pusher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes with the Mundo buffs, with the buffs to the runes later on. I feel like they're just trying to get these tanks in a little bit more comfortable position, which I quite like. We always see Cho'Gath being picked by people who really like him. I know that Kerberos and UKLC on Diabolus have been a big fan of it. And, he's a big, beefy tank. He does his job. A lot of CC. I think it's a nice little change. think it's going to make his trading a lot better in lane as well, as Rupture's like the most annoying part of Cho'Gath to lane against. So quite good.
Yeah.
Yep.
The side note being that mid AP Cho'Gath, very slightly more of a thing. Hooray!
Yeah. You like AP Cho'Gath?
No, not at all. I think Cho'Gath's kit is garbage. Like, I think he's an incredibly archaic designed champion. I think he's in desperate need of a rework, and that I think very few people will miss his specific kit when it's gone. Like, he's there is.
I don't know, man. He's like a stat check, but he's a good tank, right? Like, he's not great, but he's pretty solid.
I think I feel like his kit is just incredibly limiting with what they can do with him. Like, he's just incredibly old.
But
to be fair, isn't he one of like the OG champions of League of Legends?
I mean, they can't rework him. Look what they did with the Rise! They've reworked him a million times, and he's still an iconic champion.
Yeah,
his specific kit does not need. It's so incredibly clunky. Like, it doesn't need to be that kind of just. Like, seriously, like, the idea that all of his, apart from maybe the change they made to his E, his kit is all the same thing it was when basically the game started. Like, the idea they can't do better now is
I don't know.
ridiculous.
I like the kit. I think it's a nice kit.
I think you're a bad kit, Chronicler!
It's super straightforward.
Oh my! I think we just overloaded OBS. Holy shit.
You've activated my Super Saiyan 1. Don't make me go to 2, Chronicler.
I don't know, man. Like, he knocks fucking silencers, you know.
You're just describing the abilities. This is like the worst color caster thing ever. Like, let me tell you about this guy. I'll just tell you what these abilities are.
But that's what he does. That's what he does. Like, he's just
that's
the
what he
most
does. That's the point. Is what he does is not very interesting.
But it doesn't have to be. Like, Cyan is an interesting character either. And he's been like a
Cyan's
mainstay.
got a lot more going on. His Cyan's Q has got an actual two-stage thing to it, so you can play around it, and you can use it cleverly, and you can also use it from inside the bush.
Wait, do you think Cyan is interesting?
He's more interesting than Cho'Gath is, because that bar is on the floor.
No, you can like
you can literally stumble and trip over a champion design if you're more interested.
I concede that Cho'Gath is not incredibly fun to watch, which they don't need to, because I don't want tanks to be the only choice in top lane, but I want them to be a viable choice. But if you think Cyan is more interesting than Cho'Gath, then I think it's best to hold this discussion here, because like Cyan is the most
oh man, that is cold. That is cold, man.
Boring champion there is to watch. Like, I absolutely abhor.
That's an appalling argumentative technique, because you're making me sound like the bad guy when in fact you've got nothing to add, but you said something which makes me sound like a jerk.
You're never the bad guy, Peter. I love you.
That's right.
Alright, let's move on to Dr. Mundo. Guys,
Also
anything to add to Dr.
buffed.
Mundo?
Yes.
More tanks. Anything to add to him, except that he's a tank and he's not interesting.
So Mundo is kind of in the same place as a Malphite is, right? Where he's mostly designed to be a stat check against double AP comps. And I like that they make him a little bit more relevant outside of that, because I feel like it's like his cleaver is all right, but it's mostly, to me at least, the masochism change that really piques my interest, because that's actually a sizable buff that he gets that early on. Like, the early levels, it's actually a lot more damage that you get. And that combined with, like, Cleaver getting a little bit more oomph might mean that he has a little bit of a more comfortable time laning, which in turn might make him less of a niche pick than he currently is, because usually you just kind of don't really do anything, and then by the time you get your, like, you know, your Sunfire Caves and your Spirit Visages and whatnot, then you're going to be relevant. I feel like now you can at least get some early trades in. That's fun. That's good. I like it. I wouldn't mind seeing Mundo come back. He's an interesting tank to watch, unlike, say, Cyan or Cho'Gath.
You just triggered Peter. I could see it on his face. The word interesting.
I don't think that Dr. Mundo is anywhere near as bad as Cho'Gath in terms of, like, very, very basic design. But I do think that he's kind of like, I feel like the fact that he was designed forever ago is an anchor around his neck, in terms of, like, they've pushed further with Mundo's abilities than they have with Cho'Gath, in terms of there's just more to them. but he's still so weighed down by the fact that his abilities are so basic. Like,
I feel like the problem with Cho'Gath is that, sorry, not Cho'Gath, Dr. Mundo, either he's like super crazily good or he's just underbuffed. And if he's underbuffed, he's never picked. If he's overly good, then he's just always picked, and he's always going to be someone that's going to just dictate the pace of the game. And I think it's very hard to hit that level.
Because he's kind of a stat check, right? As I was saying, previously. And that's kind of like, I don't think for competitive I want to see a lot of Mundo, but I'd like to see him be a little bit more viable in the position where you want to pick him, which usually, like, currently doesn't happen. But you don't want Mundo to become, like, say, a blind pick, right? Like, if he's a situational pick, and he can run around just burning people and, like, popping his ultimate and just doing what Mundo does best, which is if he gets out, tank 5 people like a raid boss.
Yeah.
And he can do this in specific situations. I think it'll be fine. I think these nerfs or these buffs rather aren't big enough to propel him to like always viable status, which I think is good.
I think, Chronicler, that the thing with Dr. Mundo for me is that I agree with you that I would love to see him more, but I want to see him be someone that can be picked up once the likes of Sion and the other tanks in the top lane that you want to have. Once they're off the table, once they're not a possibility, then I think Dr. Mundo should be someone you look at. But I don't like to see him as a first pick, simply because I think he's not very interesting to watch, first off. But also, he's again, it just goes back to him being either really good or really bad. And if he's someone you have as a priority pick, either as like the first or the second priority pick, then suddenly I think there's something wrong with the meta landscape of the top lane.
I think we might see Mundo sneaking into the jungle. Certainly the Q changes to give more damage to something which has got a lot of health. I'm just going to check to see if does that have a... It's capped against monsters.
Yeah, it has a cap.
I don't think it's like a... I think that's a cap that comes into effect on stuff like Baron, though, rather than like red and blue buff. It doesn't actually say... But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing him in the jungle, but...
Yeah.
Like, imagine a world in which the sadism, like his ultimate, just did more interesting stuff than it currently does. Like, it's literally just a bunch of regen that makes you go faster. Like, that's the epitome of old League of Legends design.
Yeah, it's the same as Singed, right? Like, I get your point, Peter. I wouldn't mind a mini rework to his ultimate. I think besides that, his kid is in a pretty alright spot.
They did do some reworks on the cleaver before that, but they gave up on them.
Peter, as our in-house amateur game designer or champion designer, Chronicler says he wants to see a rework on Mundo's ult. How would you propose a rework to it?
I think just bringing in any element of interaction with the opposing side, like. You could potentially do something like, well...
So a free hit passive, a flash, a blink, and a stun and everything?
Well, I mean, you could take the angle of having it be... Well, so sadism. So sadism is having... I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily keep the ability name, because I think it's a bit of an immature, like, edgy ability name that they put in ages ago. But if you did... so sadism's having damage done to you. So you could have it... Like, if you wanted to do a very basic stuff, you could do it so that he gets more health regeneration and more damage he takes over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that you're rewarded for playing as you should be, which is to kind of draw aggro. You could have it that he's got, like, a bunch of regen at, like a stock system where he can give himself a burst of regeneration for a small amount of time. Or something which involves him hitting stuff and then he gets more. Just anything that gives him an actual way of skill expression, rather than just like, I activate sadism, that's it. For the whole duration, I just get this stuff, and all I do is run around and hit things, and the counterplay to that is just to run away.
Yeah, fair point. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to Garen then. Garen, getting a few line changes as well. And he's another tank / bruiser coming in.
It's actually, I think Garen is still like dumpster, because just the like in competitive, right? Like I said, I think the champion is fine. But I actually think that this change is pretty bonkers. Because if you get some CDR going, and the duration is like slightly nerfed, but you get 50 MR and 50 50 armor for free. And if you go like into the late game and you have a good amount of points in W and you have some CDR, you can almost keep that up permanently, which is pretty like that's an insane amount of stats to get for free. Which probably still not going to make him viable because he's still Garen has to like run at the enemy. But in solo queue, I don't know, might like push him over the edge. I think about it if we're still never going to see him.
Yeah, so guys, just to add on top of what Chronicler's saying, if you have, let's say, 40 CDR, then you can get the cooldown down to, what, like 9 seconds. So you have like a downtime of 4.
Yeah, and say you're gonna go Black Cleaver, right? Because you're Garen.
Yeah.
And you get like either a Kindle Gem item. Then you're already like approaching pretty rapidly, and then you can find a couple of ways to itemize that. But I think it's not too much of a hitch from his usual build path.
Oh, you should probably be able to get it. I don't see why you shouldn't, at least. Anything to add, Peter?
I mean, again, he's a champion with an incredibly old kit, which they added on some more like mechanics to. I feel like the whole villain thing is maybe it's just because we don't see him enough, but like I feel like the whole villain thing was a little bit of a like
I don't think like with all the other champions I will kind of agree, but with Garen, he's supposed to be your first league champion, right? Like not every champion has to be competitively viable, has to do something.
Yeah.
Like he's super straightforward. He runs at people. He spins to win. He silences them, and then he takes them down if they're too strong. Like,
well, that's the thing.
I don't
I
think the guy needs more.
I would come into that with the disagreed, because I feel like someone with a very straightforward kit like this, I don't know if necessarily is good for new players, just because you've got so little way of doing anything but, choosing the right moment to use all these things. So if you're a new player and you're like, okay, I need to go in on them at this point, like you're not going to know what those points are, and you don't, it's because you're playing a melee champion.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like I feel like that's like new players don't care. They just want to play some. Like it depends on the new player, obviously, but I think you're reading too much into how new players would value
Not
a
dying over and
complex
over
champion. No, but like Garen is not a complex champion, and starting out with not a complex champion is good because there is just, if you're a new player to League, there are so many things you need to keep track of, right? Like the game is so incredibly complex. But I think it's really good to have some really basic champions like Garen in the game, like CSing, turrets, like what the hell 99% of the people you play against do. It's good to have something steadfast, something that shines against evil. And Garen isn't good, but like the fact that his baseline efficiency is really high is a good thing.
I would agree, but I also want to add that I think for the competitive side of League of Legends, I think it's bad that someone like Garen isn't viable. Because I think when you say Garen is good for new players, I definitely agree. But then you also think of Ashe, who's in like a tutorial, and she's viable from time to time. I think Garen needs a rework to make him viable for competitive play, while still being fairly easy to play.
I do think his kit's generally more entertaining than, say, Cho'Gath is.
You really don't like Cho'Gath, do you, Peter?
Dude, no, the problem is I do like Cho'Gath. That's the problem.
That's why you want him to be more fun.
Like, if I didn't like him, I just wouldn't care.
But, like, no, I think that trying to make every champion viable in competitive is a pipe dream that you're never going to achieve. And
definitely, but I think that should be the goal.
I really disagree.
I would say that, like, I don't think it's a bad aim to have, just because, well, I mean, they've already been doing this whole thing with for quite a while, the champ releases have been dramatically slowed down, and we're basically just going through a long period of champions being deleted and replaced with similar looking champions which have the same name. So, like, in terms of, Cyan, Urgot and whatnot, like, those champions are gone, and a champion which does some of the same stuff, but just with a better backbone to the whole characters there. So I think, I don't know, like, maybe, well, you guys have a much better idea than me as to what it is that keeps Garen out of competitive. Like, if you could keep...
It's just like
it's everything.
Doesn't do it. Like,
yeah, it's everything.
He doesn't have CC. He's not strong enough to be stat check. right? Like he doesn't just automatically win top lane, so he can't really bully because people can play around him in high level. He doesn't have a dash. Like that's my problem, right? I think that the things that make Garen not a competitive pick are the kind of things that you don't want to give him because, like, that's kind of like a lot of the champions that are currently viable either they win lane automatically or they have like insane push priority. They have dashes, they have CC, and adding these kind of things to basically everyone is kind of like at a point that's going to make everything viable, but it's also going to homogenize everything. So I think something like Garen is just good.
Basically, he's a fighter that can't fight. Imagine if you gave him, let's say, Draven's W, then suddenly he can actually move faster, and then he could get onto you. That would be an issue.
Up, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't last for very long.
Guys, I know how to fix him.
Okay.
The only part of Garen's kit that's honestly iconic is his judgment. Like, everything else you can pretty much throw away. Like, I mean, probably his ultimate is pretty big, but honestly, you could probably take it or leave it. But judgment is the main thing, the spinning to win. So what I suggest is we fully lean into the Beyblade aspect of Garen. So when you're spinning, your W is a charge-up effect, something like Fate's Call, and then you can sling yourself at terrain and try and bounce yourself off terrain towards other people.
I love it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sold.
I would be okay with that.
Oh.
Like, wouldn't that just be incredible?
I don't think I'd ever want to actually see it because I think it would be like absolutely terrifying to play against. But it sounds hilarious, Peter. So
I'm sold on that here. Just give him an execute as well. If he hits someone while dashing, then that's gonna be an execute. That would be amazing.
You want to have the pull style thing. So I think when he bounces off terrain, hits somebody, and then like a pull cue or something, he like either he bounces off or they bounce off in a certain direction.
Okay,
I love it. I'm sure that's not gonna bug ever.
We're being ambitious on our channels, though. We don't worry about things that work mechanically in the game.
I love it.
Well, to move on, Leona getting a cooldown on her E. Oh, sorry, getting a decrease on the cooldown on her E. So basically, she's just gonna move around a bit more.
It's nice, right? Like it's good in late game team fights.
Yeah, that's kind
gonna have it.
That's more or less it, right? That you're gonna have a bit more beef to work with in late game team fights, and probably also a bit, or you will have a bit more to work with in the mid game too. I don't think there's a lot more to add to her.
I don't think she's, at least currently, she didn't level the Zenith Blade, I think, till last. But yeah, her Q cooldown is a straight 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe, actually, no, Zenith Blade maybe was leveled second just because you didn't actually get anything from leveling the Q apart from just a bit.
That might be the case. I feel like now you're just going to have so much mobility in late game team fights with Blade, which is kind of nice, right? Like, it's actually, especially considering that you're going to get a lot of CDR going as well.
And honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Leona be a viable support pick.
I think she will be.
Yeah,
I think she already... Like
for competitive play, she doesn't have enough mobility to be viable, I think, and now she has that.
I just feel like what she does is just very binary, right? Leona Leona wants to go in. That's basically what she does.
Yeah.
And the problem with going in is that if you're behind, Leona just doesn't do that. Like, she doesn't provide that much because her defensive crowd control is just not nearly as good as like her lockdown and engaging potential.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other I feel like it's just more a case of, and maybe this is the thing that like tilts her over the edge, that she can also do more late game. But I feel like Leona is just in lane, you're a melee support that needs to all in basically, which really limits your options.
Well, I'm generally a fan of like, because Leona's identity is basically just her engage. Like, that's her whole identity.
Yeah.
I generally am going to be a fan of champions being able to do that, like express that identity in the late game more frequently.
Yeah, so, fair point.
Like, I think with the cooldown reduction, man, that's going to be extremely low. Like, because I mean, currently, like, you take a Leona engage, you get engaged on, and that's like, and you have the ult drop down. That like kind of like bit of time is all that Leona kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully, with the Zenith Blade going down, it means that she's more of a presence in team fights in terms of like you have to keep like at least a fifth of your brain around to watch out for Leona, then re-engaging back into you again. Like, if the team starts running away, then suddenly they turn around and re-engage, or like they continue chasing you down, whatever. Like, I don't know. I think it's probably better.
Yeah.
I still think her W is a little bit of a waste of design space, but hey.
Okay. Well, moving on to Lissandra. She's again. We're going back to the whole mid laner is having a push priority. Now she's not gonna have that as easily because there's a bigger cooldown on the ice shard, especially in the early game. That's 4 extra seconds.
That's pretty
That's
it's
a
really
huge
gonna,
change.
Yeah, like an early shove is gonna be neutered, which means that stuff that is looking to punish her now can more effectively. Because late game, it doesn't really change that much, which I think is fine. Because there's not really where you pick Lissandra. You pick a 30 early shove and roam.
Yeah.
And this is actually gonna do a fairly good job at negating that, because the initial nerf is so much bigger than the nerf once you scale it. So I think it's good.
Yeah, I like the change, and then I'm just gonna skip my own rule here and add in Morgana. I think when you then look down towards Morgana as well, I like that they're taking away some of her damage as well on her Tormented Shadow, because that's also a pushing power, or a pushing ability. And when you take some of that away, you kind of say, okay, Lissandra is gonna be less viable, but her counters is also gonna have a harder time against her.
Well, to touch back on the Lissandra stuff, like, she's been crazy present in pro play for quite a while, so I think she really deserves to have some chunks taken out of her. And I don't know if it was Chronicler or you or Daedalus who mentioned before that Silas as the other mid lane.
That was Chronicler, yeah.
Yeah, like, he'll be getting some nerfs later on in these patch notes.
Some nerfs. Yeah, he's getting fucking hammered, and good for it, because he does way too much.
Yeah, like, these are the two problematic mid laners, so yeah, I don't think anyone apart from maybe Lissandra mains are going to be mad about Ice Shard having much worse wave clear.
Yeah. Well, do you guys have anything to add to Morgana?
No, it's super straightforward, right? Like, mid Morgana is a little bit too much.
And she's a very hard counter to some of the likes of, let's say, Lissandra, because you have a lot of health and you have the black shield.
Yeah. And Morgana support is going to be fine. Like, that, this doesn't really matter to her at all, because she's a black shield binding bot.
Yeah, and you don't really build a lot of AP on a Morgana.
Yeah, so I think it's fine. I think that based on what I saw from Riot previously, is like Morgana mid just had an absurd win rate in solo queue, and they were like, gonna neuter that a little bit, which seems fine to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, her health regen, I'm not sure is like that is very, very low, but she's got that spell vamp, so like,
well, in our way off to Pike.
yeah.
Q cooldown decreased early and E stun duration increased. So
That's scary.
yeah, he's a scary champion, very hard to balance, and now he's getting more all-in power.
Not a huge fan, but like Pike's kit is so he's gonna be frustrating anyway, right? So I don't think it really matters. If you actually want to make him viable as Riot, then this is kind of the way to go. Like, I like Bone Skewer because it's just CC, right? Phantom Undertow, it's fine. It doesn't I think the things that are most annoying to me about Pike is his slipperiness and his snowball potential.
Mm-hmm.
And his slipperiness doesn't really get touched, which is fine because that's kind of what the champion does. But it also means he's not more annoying. Obviously, his snowball potential is a little bit better. Although I don't think the Q cooldown, how much does that really matter? Because look at what it actually is. It's like a second or a second and a half at most.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to matter too much.
And to be fair, the stun duration, it's what dot 25. It's it's nothing.
So it's a really, really light buff. So I don't really have a strong opinion about this.
Yeah. I do think it's a way to try and encourage people to give Pike another try again. The people on Reddit were talking about Pike as a champion who was there for people who are auto-filled support, and trying to get them to just to play in a way which made them feel more like a solo laner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get behind that, but well, since it's such a light buff, let's just move on to Rumble, W movement speed increased or cooldown decreased. So I would love to see more Rumble. He's one of my favorite top laners, and I definitely wouldn't mind seeing him come back.
It's really fun. I don't think the changes matter too much though. Like the movement speed, it's nice, but you're never gonna.
I think the big takeaway is definitely his ult, having minus 15 seconds on his ult in the mid game. It's gonna be I think that's not necessarily like a big change, but it's definitely going to be something that's gonna matter.
It's so as Rumble, like your first 11 levels are where you shine, right? Like, this is where you want to make use of your equalizer.
Yeah.
Like the late game 20 seconds, I think doesn't really matter. It's like the level 6 and the level 11 one. And I don't know if 10 and 15 seconds respectively is enough to make a big difference there.
No, every time every time I've been seeing, at least, I don't know how this is for you guys, but when I've been seeing Rumble in, like, the amateur competitive stuff, it's nearly always been pretty disappointing. So
yeah, well, I just think that having 15 less seconds on that cooldown when you're looking, if you build a comp around Rumble or if you build the mid game comp, then having those 15 extra seconds to play with could lead to more objectives. And I definitely think that if you're good enough, that you can abuse this. But I do agree with you, Chronicler, that it's not really that big of a change, more like a niche change.
But I wouldn't mind to see Rumble back. I agree with you there. I think he's a fun champion to watch. He's not very fun to play against, but
no, he's not. One small thing on the scrap shield change as well is that for anyone who doesn't play Rumble at all, that has a sort of a knock-on effect that the enhanced scrap shield gets half again as much. So, like, that's another 10 movement speed compared to what you would have otherwise gotten 5 before. So, I don't know, I guess he's going to be a little bit tricky to get away from if he does manage to get on top of people.
Yeah. Well, moving on to Silas, Chronicler, take it away.
Oh, Silas is busted. Brian seems to realize that as well because he is like first priority blind pick.
He's literally 100% pick ban. Literally.
Yeah. So, and he does too much. Like his wave clear is absurd. His sustain is absurd. Once he gets ahead, his snowballing potential really isn't that bad. People initially felt like he had a weak late game, but I think that has been somewhat alleviated as well, just with how people are playing. And I think what I do here is, especially like the E, is something that really, like, you're never going to level E, right? Like, it's either going to be Q or W, although W's hit fairly hard as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the E nerfs, especially initially, like 18 seconds, that's pretty crazy. And you're going to get a lot of CDR going. But all in all, I think these are good starts. What they don't do is address his shoving issues, right? Like Silas is so good, not only because he can outduel everyone that kind of tries to threaten him with Aftershock, which is going to be nerfed like very hard thanks to the E nerf, which is good. But he's still going to be able to shove just as hard. So I think that he's still going to be viable. But I do think this is a good nerf, and I hope it just makes him into something that you can't blind pick anymore. Because that's what really bugs me, is that you can just safely first pick blind pick him every single time and there's no punishment. And this might be enough to at least make him not as strong. But I'm hesitant.
Yeah, just to touch further on what you're saying there, Chronicler, about the blind picks. Like, you'd imagine a champion who's dependent entirely on what ultimates the opposing team are bringing out should be the last person you'd ever want to blind pick.
Yeah, yeah, great point. I agree.
But I don't think people will. But if you were to go for like E max second, you would take up to like level 12 to get back to the same cooldown that you used to have at level 1. So yeah, like I'm really in favor of. He feels like he's. I kind of feel like to throw some shade at the Riot design team, which I'm sure is a very sensible idea. Like I kind of feel like they've got a bunch of different mechanics that they want to try out on champions, and that they just kind of like each of the champions that comes out is just a bunch of those mechanics slapped onto one champion. Like I feel like to an extent, Zoe was, and. It's, like, oh come on! Like, what does her stealing like items and stuff have anything to do with
I
her?
agree with you. Just like Zoe is it's not you saying something about Zoe. He's just mentioning Zoe, like,
Oh right, I see. It's a reaction. Yeah, like, it's just
It's
a bunch of-
PTSD.
So,
yeah. But yeah,
yeah, I think less of do everything.
yes, I definitely agree with Chronicler that Silas is gonna be less viable as a like blind pick now. But I don't think he's out of the game because he still has a lot of sustain and a lot of shotting coming from his Q.
yeah.
So I don't think he's out of the game, but he's
It's
definitely not
it's-
a blind pick anymore.
It's his passive, right? Like that makes it so easy to just to zap through waves. I think he's still going to have that because his passive was not touched whatsoever. Like E is going to be a little bit awkward, but even without your E being available on every single wave, you're still going to have like 2 procs of E. That's 2 procs of passive, a Kingslayer proc, and a Lashing Change proc, and then that all in all is still more than enough to like shred through a wave in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the gut feeling that he's still going to be pretty good.
I think so as well.
Definitely, but now we're moving on to items, and now talking about tanks, Cinderhulk is getting buffed right here, so 300% bonus magic damage to minions and monsters, meaning it's going to be easier to play tanks in the jungle.
Hooray, Mundo! Hooray, Cho'Gath! No, it's Sejuani.
Yeah, it's like the Sejuani's, the Zax.
Gragas as well, if you want to go for tank Gragas.
Yeah, tank Gragas. You can go Cinderhulk on Olaf, but Olaf is like the last champion that needs clear speed. Skarner's probably happy with it. And Skarner's like on the cusp of viability, right? So I think that's a nice change. I'm gonna like this is something crazy, but I know that Nautilus received some buffs recently. We're starting to see him crop up in the support role, and I don't think that this change, which is my main problem, this like the Cinderhulk is good, but by the time Cinderhulk comes around, you're probably already like 2 levels behind, and like every lane is getting perma-ganked while you're Nautilus, right? So I don't think it'll actually be enough, but I like that this is the direction they go for. I still feel like tank junglers, just because of how the state of the jungle is currently, as I mentioned previously, like you're just not gonna be able to farm back up if you're behind, and aggro junglers are gonna get ahead early, which is fine. But with the state of the game as it is currently, I don't think you can afford to play it slow and try to farm up and try to get stuff done, because games feel like the pace is so quick at the moment. They just don't have the time to do that. So I like the change. I think it's a good direction, but I don't think it's enough.
To add on to that, like, it's notable that it's not, this isn't Balmy Cinder that's getting buffed. It's just the full completed Cinderhulk. So, I think you're right, Chronicler, that by the time this is done and it has had a significant impact, I'm not sure it will be making that much difference as to how the game lays out.
Yeah.
Yep. Certainly.
Maybe in pro play though, because there things can be a lot slower, right? If you pick a comp with a lot of priority, I can see it work there. Maybe.
Yeah, if you have 3 lanes that can win on their own, and suddenly Cinderhulk tanks in competitive is going to be a better choice. But to move on to the Dark Seal, ability power has gone down, and sellback value has decreased.
Stacking Dark Seals, it's the best. And healthiest for the game, too.
Yeah, I don't mind this. I think that Dark Seal became a little bit too, as they're saying, right? Like, it's not their intention for the item, but just it was so good to buy, it was so good to sell. You gotta get a refreshable potion, or you have your corrupting pot with it, and then it just does stuff very well, and it does too much.
Yeah, it is definitely crazy.
And now it's, I guess, kind of reduced to more of a snowballing item, because it's always going to be cost efficient if you have your glory stacks, right? That's not the problem, which I think is good. It just puts it back in the place where it's supposed to be, according to Riot.
But
it's supposed to be good with one of them as opposed to multiple of them.
And I'm happy that you mentioned like the key word here, which is snowballing. The Dark Seal should be all about snowballing, which they mention in the description that you buy it so that you can buy Soul Stealer later on. So you're not gonna see like a Singed just stack multiple of the Dark Seals anymore.
Yeah, Lysandra is also quite, because Lysandra was one of the laners who went like double Dark Seal, right?
Yeah.
So this is, I think Lysandra got like hit really hard this patch, and I think like we might still see her in compositions that want to go for this mid game power spike, where you try to set up dives, or you try to do stuff in the mid game. But I don't think, and I hope the same goes with Silas, that they're still perma pick and ban, which I think would be really good for the game because it's been a while.
I assume that the reason Dark Seal had a really high sellback value is because there's a decent chance you'll just get killed over and over again. And so you'll be like, screw this Dark Seal, it's not doing anything for me, sell. But, yeah.
Yeah. Well, moving on. Oh, sorry, do you have something to add, Chronicler?
No, that's all right.
Well, moving on to Wit's End then. It has been updated, so basically a lot of things have been shifted around. It's cost a bit more now. It costs around 500 more gold. But you get more stats, and now you get healing from it instead of stealing magic resistance. So, hooray, and now you can never use it on a range AD carry anymore. Or you can, but it's definitely not as strong.
You can build an arranged AD carry that's building Runeans.
Yeah.
But aside from that, yeah.
Well, if you want a lot of healing, then it's good, but you're definitely not going to see it on perhaps, let's say, a Cockmore anymore. At least not as a first item, where it used to be extremely strong.
Like in niche situations, you see like people like Aurelia and Yasuo build it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the movement speed it now grants, it's actually a lot better on those champions. Like melee champions are going to be very happy with this change. And imagine something like this on an Aurelia or a Jax, right? Like that's disgusting. That's really spooky.
The healing on this is apparently it's approximately similar to a Bloodthirster. Like once you get up to max level.
Yeah, and then you also have like.
Honestly, I could see it on a lot of different champions. I could see it being built on the likes of, if you want to go for like AD Rek'Sai, I could see it being built. I could see it on an Aatrox and Olaf. I could just see it in a lot of different builds simply because I think it's not necessarily like a crazy first item, but 2 or 3 items. If you're snowballing, then this could be a very good item to go for.
Well, to expand this to a larger point, like I'm trying to think. I think there are a few items that do this, but like the whole idea of an item that literally gets better as the game goes along, like I don't think is super common unless I'm missing something really obvious. I know Sunfire does it.
IE does, right? Like not like
in the sort of way the crit does.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, so
because of how crit works.
So Peter's thinking of like items that directly get better.
The
longer the game goes on.
But I feel like it's not just there being an actual scaling passive on it, right? Like if it effectively scales better into the late game, then kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like this design because I feel like it opens up design space for them to be like, here's an item that would be ridiculous if it was a first buy, but we've got a lever to now make it so that it's not really viable as a first buy. Like, I think the numbers were like about level 9. It was pretty like, well, I mean, yes, you can sort of see like as maybe like a second or third item.
But yeah,
it's a lot better.
Imagine if, let's say we have an Irelia, like Chronicler mentioned, you have a first item and then you get this. Suddenly you have a lot of attack speed, you have unhit damage, movement speed, and healing. You have pretty much everything you want. Then throw in, let's say, an Irelia against an AP mid laner. Then you also have the magic resistance. Like it's
I don't know.
Definitely a good item.
I feel like you would still buy this first item. Like it's 3k gold. Like by what time are you going to finish that item?
Probably around
like in a general game if you don't snowball.
Let's
like
say
level 6, somewhere between 6 and 8. That's a little bit early, right?
Yeah, let's be generous and say like 10 to 12 minutes. Then you have finished it.
Yeah, so isn't at that point your unhit damage like already going to be close to previous Wit's End, which means that by the time you get it, it's only going to get better. So like I'm not sure, right? But looking at when you're actually going to finish this item, now that it's cost almost 3k gold, like when do you get your Triforce, right? I don't know. I feel like it's less of a power spike than Triforce, so it's going to be dependent on what you're laying against. But I don't think it's going to be too bad. And then, as you mentioned, like it's only going to get better from that point on.
Maybe it's something you pick up when you're against someone like Vladimir. Or saying like if you're against someone like a Vladimir, maybe it's going to be a lot better just to have that option.
Yeah.
Well, I am actually not that good at math, but like let's say you get like 4.5 extra on hit per level, right? If my math isn't completely off the charts.
I'm willing to let you take that bullet, sure.
Yeah, okay, so let's say you get 4.5 extra on hit per level from Wit's End. And I can actually, as Chronicler says, I can see it being build as the first item. Because that's a lot of unhit. If you get it at, let's say, level 6, and suddenly it's what, like 30?
I do think this could potentially be a pretty broken item. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah,
Well,
it's too difficult to
we
call it.
need some stats, guys. Well, let's move on to runes. Eyeball collection updated, and same goes for a bunch of different runes.
I really like this. I think this is a big positive change. Like, it's been a long time they've been trying to figure out how to reward support players for playing like support players in a way which doesn't just reward everybody. And I think they might have managed to at least take a step towards it with this. Because you probably have to take all 3 of these changes into account at the same time, the Eyeball, Ghost, and Zombie, because they're all so closely connected to each other.
Yeah. So basically, guys, it's a lot of vision being changed around so that you get a more adaptive force. For the Eyeball collection, basically you get more adaptive force per stack. Now you can only get, or you can still get 20, but there's only 10 stacks. For the Ghost Poro, you are like incentivized to go for go and kill wards, I think, and also when your wards expire, you get a Ghost Poro, and then when you have spawned, I think it's 10 Ghost Poros, then you get an additional 10 adaptive force, and you've already got 20 from spawning 10 of them.
My understanding is that the Ghost Poro is like the support rune, because you have to get a ward out and it has to expire 10 times for you to get this 30 adaptive force, which now all of these different ones grant the same amount.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't got a support item, you probably it will take you like 25 minutes to get it going, whereas if you're a support, you can get this a lot quicker. The zombie ward is for clearing wards, so presumably that's directed at junglers.
I think at some point Eyeball collection is also going over to junglers. Eyeball is just for early game junglers, and then Zombie Ward is more for control junglers.
I don't know, like, I imagine it's... I guess it depends on the game, because if we're talking about the difference between solo queue and competitive, like, there's not going to be that many kills to get the takedowns from, compared to the amount of wards that are going to be going around.
Bless you.
That was an adorable sneeze.
Well,
I know. I have an adorable sneeze. I also trained myself to not show.
It's like that movie Frozen. Yeah, I understand.
Well, Peter, I think I can see the point you're making, but I definitely think that if you have an early game jungler, then it probably would make more sense to go for the Eyeball collection, since you're looking to snowball and getting more damage from those kills. So like you get an extra bonus advantage on top of it. Just makes more sense in my head than trying to go for ward clears, which is generally something that you see control junglers go for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. I mean, you're right that if you think you can actually get those kill or assists, I think that maybe it's just more reliable to be able to go after wards or place that to go after ward clearing. Also, the LS had an interesting point, which I'm not sure if this will come true, but because you can share ward takedowns to an extent by having one person reveal and the other person actually kill them, you could potentially share zombie wards with your support and roam around with fun. Yeah, like, I don't know if that will actually happen, but I love the idea. So you just go and reveal it, your support kills it, or you both kill it, and then, I don't know.
Why not?
It might happen.
Right. Well, anything more to add, Chronicler?
Not really. I feel like you guys have covered the discussion on these ward runes fairly well.
Nice. Well, let's move on to the last few runes. Cut down to begin with. Damage versus extremely high health targets has been increased.
That still seems bad. I don't know, like 3%. Is that going to make the difference?
No, it's not.
Yeah, no.
I can't remember who it was who had the point. It might have been Skara saying that, or possibly Freak, or less. Those are the 3 people I watched. The AD carries health pool is actually relatively high. Like, it's just the resistances and things aren't. So it's actually, like in lane, it's going to be really hard to get this cut down to actually do anything at all.
Yeah. Well, moving on to Demolish then. Taking another look at a rune that a lot of people they use, right? They think it's bad, and I can understand why. Because people they look at Demolish and they actually see it come into effect, which they don't really see with other minor runes.
Yeah, you're right. Having a visible effect makes a big difference.
I like the change. I think that basically what you want Demolish to do is you want to give tanks a way to push turrets.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's kind of the design of the rune. But you don't want it to be as good as bruises because then it's too much. But you want tanks to at least have somewhat of an effect. And I think that this is a good start. Is it going to be enough? I think that's really hard to call. But I love that at least they try to go for something like that. They try to make that work. And whether or not it's actually going to be enough to have people actually pick up Demolish remains to be seen. But I don't mind it.
Yeah, I do agree. Like giving it as much as I was confused as well. I believe there was some changes in place for Aftershock, which haven't made it into this patch.
Not yet. It's been changed last patch as well, where they changed it to like 2.7 seconds instead of 3.5, which was like a bug fix. If I remember correctly. So the period in which you have the resistance is a lot shorter, which I think is good.
Why don't they just revert to Courage of the Colossus? That was my jam.
Yeah.
You couldn't take that on anyone who wasn't a tank. Admittedly, it was a little bit problematic on those that were tanks, but you could still that's something you could have fixed because at least it was directed at the right people. Like as opposed to now, I kind of feel almost to an extent that by crippling Lysandra, they sort of sidestep the whole need to address the Aftershock properly. Because she's the one who uses Aftershock the worst. If we kill her,
well, I mean,
yeah,
Silas also abuses Aftershock.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Courage
definitely
of Colossus. Courage of Colossus.
Okay. Well,
You want to see it back?
Yeah.
I would love to see it come back as well. But yeah, Peter, you seem to be someone who likes your tanks. What do you think about overgrowth?
I mean, as someone who used to stack percentage health increase runes back in the day, it's so hard to notice that this is going to be a thing, I suspect. In combination with the Demolish and the buffs to the jungle items, maybe together those things will make a noticeable difference, but this individually, I just, the numbers are going to be pretty pitiful.
I want it to be good. But I don't.
I want it to be good.
I love the idea of being I'm a raid boss, but it's not good.
I think the League needs to find ways to make that kind of interaction more interesting.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
Imagine if you got an item when you were a tank. Okay, this is really out there, but imagine if you got an item when you were a tank, which basically made you into a raid boss, which meant that you had say you had a shield that went around you, that like a Yasuo wind wall that circled around you, which meant that people had to hit you at certain times to do damage to you. Just something like that, where your tankiness is a way to make the game more interesting and not just kind of the whole stat check thing we've been talking about multiple times. I don't know.
Yeah, something visible.
Yeah. Just something that adds to the game rather than just kind of slows the game down.
Yeah. Well, I like the thought, Peter. Well, last two runes of the day, guys. Predator and Ultimate Hunter. Predator just getting changed a bit, so it's a usability improvement, and then Hunter, or Ultimate Hunter rather, is getting a cooldown reduction increased. So you'll get more cooldown reduction off of it.
Was anybody taking Ultimate Hunter?
Yeah.
Previously?
Karthus does, right?
Yeah, so I think he was supposed to be the only one.
Karthus Jungle does, and that's pretty much it, to my knowledge.
Buff Karthus Jungle?
No, I think Nocturne might get it as well.
Yeah, I think he might as well.
He can get it. And that is it, right? So I think these are good changes, buff up some stuff that doesn't get used. Predator is minor, but might be nice.
Can you stick it on Rumble and be like, Rumble doesn't really build cooldown reduction for the most part.
Why? Yeah, but then it's very snowball reliant if you're not jungler, right?
Hey, we have seen.
Then if you want to see the return of Rumble in the jungle,
yeah, why not?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
All right, sold.
I would want that. So I think that more or less covers this entire patch notes.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there are some bug fixes down
Okay.
at the bottom.
Oh, you have something to talk about there?
I'm trying to remember if there was something in here.
Because I don't want to talk about skins, and I don't really want to talk about
Oh, there
the
was
Mac
a
client.
There was a Talia E bug which was really crazy.
Yeah, so
which-
that's fixed a bug where Talia's E was scaling incorrectly.
Also, there was a Yorick bug with his pets, with his ghouls, Mistwalkers, I think they call them, unnecessarily. And that's just something that allows you to set off the Conqueror, I think, a little bit more easily.
Yeah.
But, whatevs.
Nice. Well, I think that more or less covers this episode of the patch notes breakdown. Guys, you can obviously find my two guests' social media links in the description below. Obviously, remember to leave a like and subscribe. But guys, do you have anything that you want to say before we end today's video?
I'm trying to think of something witty, but I think everything I'm going to say stands for us is
Thank your mom
I had a very fun time. I hope I didn't bash on you too hard, Petey. You know I love you.
That's right. I will always treasure that big argument we had about Shogath. I feel like that's really moved us forward as people. I guess I would say, to add on to our theme of abandoning the game, I'll see you guys in Tetris 99.
Yes.
Nice.
Best battle royale out there.
Hoorah.